Frida Jane Knowshisgun was 34 years old when she suddenly disappeared without a trace. She was a member of the Crow tribe and lived with her family between Crow Agency and Billings in Montana. She was known to be brave and kind and not afraid to stick up for herself and others. She was known for her intelligence, for her quick wit, and for being a good student who was working hard to finish college and better her education for herself and for her family. And she was a part of a large, tightly knit family with 3 children of her own, Lyrical, Trinity, and Mason, and she loved her children more than anything. She had their names tattooed on her back, and she had just promised them that she would make it home at the end of the month to take them trick-or-treating for Halloween. This was a big deal for her children, and I'm sure for Frida as well, but her family were perhaps a little cautious over this promise. At some point in 2015, they had noticed a pretty big shift in Frida's behaviour. She would start dropping in and out of the family home, disappearing for sometimes days at a time, and her new friends were more than a little troubling. The family grew concerned, but that concern would only continue to grow when Frida began abusing drugs and disappearing more often until she would finally officially move out of the family home and to Billings, Montana, with some of her new acquaintances. But when she reached out to a friend in October of 2016, she was actually trying to make her way back from Kennewick, Washington, over 740 miles away from her family's home in Crow Agency. She told her friend that she needed money so that she could afford to make the trip back home and keep her promise to her children, and her friend agreed to help her. They set up an online money transfer, and Frida was waiting for the money to come through at a customer service desk at a Walmart, but the money didn't go through. There was a mix-up with Frida's last name, Knowshisgun, and it's a pretty common mix-up that happens when translating names from Crow to English. On Frida's birth certificate, she's registered as Knowshisgun, but in English, Crow family names use a his in the middle, meaning that Frida would also go by the name Knowshisgun. Frida, like many other members of the Crow tribe, would have documentation using the name and would use both versions of her name herself, and that was what had held up the money transfer that day. Frida remained in contact with her friend while this confusion was sorted out, and she hung up when it was clear that the money was eventually going to come through. But just 15 minutes after this last phone call with her friend, Frida's phone would stop working. Frida's friend would try to reach her several times, wanting to know if she had received the money or if there were any other problems, but she never got through to her, and perhaps more disturbingly, the money was never collected. The family tried to remain calm, knowing that Frida was having a difficult time, but they trusted that she would eventually come back around because she loved her children and she wanted to be with them. They stayed calm again when Frida didn't show up and keep her promise to take her children out trick-or-treating, just 14 days after the last phone call with her friend. But when she missed her aunt's funeral in November, they knew something was awry. Frida had been very close to her aunt, and funerals are an incredibly important ceremony for Native Americans, and they knew that Frida would not have just missed it. They filed a missing persons report with the police, hoping that they would be able to find her, but the police were more than a little cagey. They first told the family that there was little they could do to track Frida down because she was an adult and there was no evidence that she had left her family or missed the funeral unwillingly. Then they told them that there was even less they could do because Frida had a history of drug abuse. That being said, they did conduct interviews with Frida's friends and family, but Frida's new friends were less than helpful with the police, giving them no leads and no information to work with. And then things got even worse. Some of Frida's new friends would confront her family, telling them not to give their names to the police before eventually skipping town and moving state. By this point, Frida's family had gotten desperate. They filed another missing persons report in December, changing her last name from Knowshisgun to Knowshisgun, but if they were hoping that this would rekindle the investigation, they were sadly mistaken. Another 2 years would go by before they would hear anything new about Frida's case, and when they did, it was less than heartwarming. The FBI sat down with the family, asking them if they knew anything about the drug hotshot. Hotshot is also sometimes referred to as the Great Death. It's a mixture of heroin and other highly toxic and powerful opioids. Someone with a tolerance or a history of heroin abuse may have a higher tolerance for this mixture of drugs as well, but it's an incredibly easy drug to become addicted to and incredibly easy to overdose on. When the FBI were trying to imply that that's what they believed happened to Frida is uncertain, but they told the family that, quote, "Once you take that stuff, you forget who you are." Perhaps that was their way of telling the family that there was no hope of finding Frida, perhaps that they had more information, but not enough evidence to do anything with, and they wanted to bring the family some sort of closure, but whether Frida is still alive or not remains to be seen, as she has never been found. Her family and friends are still trying to come to terms with their loss and are still trying to accept that they may never get any more answers. Her eldest son, Lyrical, who's almost an adult now, makes frequent trips out to the Crow Reservation, trying to reconnect with Frida's past, with her family and friends, and trying to learn all he can about his mother and the life that she lived. Frida's mother is still holding on to hope that she is alive and just needs to be found and brought back to her family. Her cousin will often speak about her in missing and murdered Indigenous women's events, including the one that is held on May 5th every year. She is trying to keep awareness about Frida's case alive and in people's minds, and she's still searching for answers to this day. Her cousin says that she keeps a picture of Frida in her desk drawer at work, and she says she often opens it during the day just to look at her or to tell her what's going on with her children and their lives. She says she tells her when they've started high school or gotten braces, and often just ends up telling her that it's time to come home now. Her sister can't bring herself to participate in those missing and murdered Indigenous women's events, and she can't celebrate Frida's birthday. She says it's like cutting open a wound again, but every time it cuts a little deeper. She would also give a heartbreaking interview with the newspaper The Independent Record, talking about what life has been like without Frida and the experience her friends and family have had whilst trying to find her. She said, quote, "There never goes a day, an hour, a minute, a second without thinking about her. I'm still in denial. I tell myself she's out there somewhere. I often catch myself talking to her, praying her spirit hears my spirit, asking the Creator to protect her, watch over her, let her please come home to the realization that we all miss her a lot, and our family is not the same without her, and that her children need her. Frida would now be 40 years old, but at the time of her disappearance 6 years ago, she had waist-length brown hair, which she always wore in a bun or a ponytail. She has brown eyes, a long scar on her right elbow, and a few tattoos across her body in areas that are not particularly easy to spot. There are the tattoos of her children's names on her back. On her right calf, she has a tattoo of Mickey Mouse holding a basketball. On her right shoulder, she has a few initials and a flower. And on her right upper arm, she has 2 masks and a banner that reads Knowshisgun. Those with any information regarding this case are urged to come forward with any information, no matter how significant or not that information may seem. Frida's 3 children are hoping for answers, and all they want is for their mother, Frida, to return home to them.